Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Today, I'm very excited to introduce you to our guest. Here is a quote. Before I do that, when we do not interrupt others, their authenticity becomes clearer to us. Authentic. Guardian value A. Our guest today, founder, Guardian Roofing and Siding, friend to the Culture Matters podcast, steward of authenticity, leader, supporter of Culture Matters, trailblazer. I'm excited to continue these conversations down the values of Guardian Roofing and Siding. And today we're doing the inversion or playing around with the opposites of this value, which is when we do not interrupt others, their authenticity becomes clear to us. Our guest, Robert Frehafer, is surprisingly expert at this value in my observation over the years. Like a tiny pebble dropped at the top of a mountain now is a boulder flying down. So I really appreciate you for coming on the Culture Matters podcast to unpack this value today
Thank
and
you.
share these examples.
Thank you very much for having me, Mr. Doran. Appreciate it. And thanks again for another awesome introduction. You caught my interest with the one word surprisingly. Surprisingly. Can you tell the listeners about that, Jay? Why is it so surprising that potentially I can listen and not interrupt others for their authenticity to become clearer to me?
I think there part of it is would be my own worry that the things that I do don't have significance because they don't work. Right. So let's, if you're a teacher and you have 20 people in the class and a handful of them get F's and you have a couple A's, you might associate the A's with their own self responsibility and motivation. They don't really even need you. And then the F's, you feel like a loser and a failure, and you may or not be able to have an impact on these kids. Who knows what's happening at home or what's stopping them from passing. And then somewhere in the middle of that classroom, you have all the C students and the B students, and it's not very exciting. And it makes me think of one of my favorite quotes in the world: "The give me 100 men, 10 of them shouldn't even be there. 80 are just targets. 9 are the real fighters, and we are lucky to have them, for they make the battle. Ah, but one is a warrior. They will bring the others back." So it's surprising because every once in a while I run into a warrior and I have to question, like, oh, did I actually, what role did I play? So that's one piece of it, is me. And the other piece is it's hard. These tests are hard, I think. They're inherently hard. And the structure of the classroom is hard. So for our listenership that's like really into the podcast, and if they're out there and they listen to the entrepreneurship's hard and never, yeah, and not and it takes. I think it really takes effort and time and other things that I don't know what they are yet to learn the lessons, to unlearn. So that's why, surprisingly, astonishingly, awesomely, I'm really excited to share my inversion.
Shoot, go ahead.
When we do not interrupt others, their authenticity becomes clear to us. So that's the value. Here's the opposite. Hey, sorry to interrupt. I don't want to forget what I was going to say. Because I hear that all the time, right? And so it's so banal, but it does separate us from each other. Hey, sorry to interrupt. I didn't want to forget what I was going to say. Although I did hire you to think so that you can actually do things in the company and increase the value. But let me just continue thinking for you
Mm.
and doing everything for you and then paying you and taking less for myself as the owner. Hey, sorry, I did interrupt. I don't want to forget what I was saying or I was going to say. And and without that impulse, likely wouldn't have started the company. What comes to mind?
So many times we do that without the exact word that you just said, without apologizing, without recognizing that you're interrupting, and without saying I don't want to forget. It just happens naturally. We have something that we'd like to say, and and most times I believe, for many people, I'd like to believe, I can't say it for all people, but that it's coming from a positive place. They have information that they believe is going to impact somebody in a positive way. It's going to breed connection between the two parties. Uh, it will raise them up, the speaker. It would raise the speaker, the interrupter, up in their own mind as someone that knows something about something. So they would build confidence in the listener by interrupting and saying what they're saying. And yeah, that's what comes to mind, is how often that it happens, and culturally how often people in our society do not feel heard. And I have to take all this through my own lenses. So through my perspective, someone not feeling heard, that happens even when someone is trying to do the best that they can to listen to someone. Generally, that's I've been recognizing that in our culture. I would say definitely way more since we've been working together. How how misunderstood everybody is from each other. And I laugh because it's either laugh or cry. Like, and we have our own parameters and our own perception and projection of the world and what people are doing and thinking and saying. And it's sad, actually, when it boils down. Especially, let somebody get some emotion tied to the relationship, good, bad, or indifferent. And um and it it's tough. This is like a core of what you've taught to me, my and raised my level of awareness up. And it is an everyday practice to navigate these things. And you talked about that. It's hard. It is a hard practice in entrepreneurship and in life. This is not just a value for, selling roofing and siding and helping clients out. This is a value in listening to my children when I want them to do something and they have something else that they have on their perspective. When I'm having a conversation with a friend, when I have a different perspective from my wife. And it goes into the scenario that you talked about, working with other leaders within the company and understanding what's their perspective, what's going on, what challenges they're coming into, and listening. So yeah, I have a lot of thoughts that come to mind. I think I'm still, I don't want to say in shock because that might be an overstatement, but I'm still in a little bit of processing mode of your answer to the original question of the surprise, right? Like that was a great response. I was, when you say, oh, this gentleman talking about me is surprisingly, capable, in my mind, I thought of, because it's my perspective, right? Like either A, like, oh yeah, he's really good at listening and this, like talk about that, or B, talk about where I've come from, like in interrupting and wanting to be heard and wanting somebody to understand my perspective or whatever that would be. But rather you turned it a little bit about you, right? Which was a cool answer. That was my interpretation anyway, if that's what you meant. Like, hey, as the teacher, like you see this and you see that and where this comes from and how you perceive it from your eyes. And then you put in a very nice, I take it as a compliment. That's the way I ensued it with the quote that came to mind of those that act without particularly saying it. So I really appreciate that. So thank you for that. So it's all blending together with your question of what are your thoughts. So, but this is a value. It's so hard. We're doing this to do the inverse, right? We want to tell people like, oh, what's the opposite of what
Yeah,
it
how
is,
do
right?
we mess this up?
It's so easy for me to say the opposite because not that it was all, because I'm an all or nothing guy, but it wasn't all. But there was a strong personality trait that I had that I was able to um, communicate with people, and I say able, that it could be a positive or negative, but I was able to not listen to someone and get my point across, and it worked. From my perspective, that's what was working, but only for a time, I believe. I think there's a positive to it because I was so attached to the vision, the dream, the end goal, whatever it would be. And then I think I was able to potentially mask externally the internal thing that was going on. So I would be thinking for someone else and I would cut them off because I would think I know what they're going to say in an effort to get to the end goal quicker. And that over time led, I believe, led to people not feeling heard, not being appreciated, feeling that my decision has already been made up before even a conversation takes place. Like, why waste their time? Things of this nature. So the inverse, I have so much experience in doing it, which is not listening fully, not asking questions to understand what they're saying, not giving somebody the opportunity to complete their sentence because I want to say something. And it's not only for myself, it's also for them. Like I said, I think I have this positive thing to share with them or it'll breed connection. But after having some level of understanding that isn't always the case with people, that desire to make connection a lot of times breaks connection as I act that out. So yeah, I have so much to say about that. And from a practical standpoint, you use the word burden. And I use that often in my vocabulary. I don't say often, once a week, whatever. But it'll come up. I'll have to burden my internal desire to speak, to say, to do, as I listen, as I listen to somebody because I want to say something so bad, right? Like for whatever the reason is. And it's like this is a word I take from counseling. It's like a smoke detector that goes off inside of me. When I start to feel that excitement, the desire to share, to pay attention to it and do even, it's more of a flipping it around to listen even more to what the person's saying. Because the more that I'm thinking about what I want to say, the less I'm actually tuning in to what my counterpart is sharing with me. I'm going to miss out on their body action, their body language, the word, their tone, the nuances of what they're saying. As I know how hard it is to get the thoughts that are in my mind out to somebody else, I assume that they're doing that same thing. So I have to listen really clearly to try to get, what they're saying across. So yeah, this is a it's so they're all very important values, right? But this is elementary. If we don't listen to each other, we're like it reminds me of the Tower of Babel. Like humans are building this tower, and God's like, poof, scatters them, gives them all different languages, and they can't even communicate, so they can't build, right? Like so, from a building of a relational standpoint, an organizational standpoint, we need to be able to communicate and listen. And if we're not doing that, it's again based on my view, there's going to be hurt feelings, resentfulness, no desire to communicate, just to build our own tower, so to speak. I'm not trying to say that working and building relationships are in any way negative, like there's an association with the Tower of Babel, but in a healthy relational way. There's so much application for this. And in the business standpoint, it can happen. We're rushing, we're in a client's house, we want to communicate something, we want to get the point across, but if we don't listen to them, we're not going to figure out they're all that. So that's even so. Yeah, I'll pause on that before I talk about the value in the authentic standpoint and the clients or the other your counterparts authenticity. That's a nice little flip side of that as well.
What was your inversion, and then tie it to that.
Sure. So I wrote it down this morning before we jumped on. So rather than authentic, anonymous, like people don't even like anonymous. When we speak to be heard and don't let others change our perception, our personal will and desire is made more clear.
Hmm.
So when I just continue to say my will and desire is clear, it will be clear. And that really does, I guess that's a good point to bring it up that way. It does go to the inversion of it because even the word authentic, like when I would envision a company's values, A is in there, it's authentic. Like I would think I would immediately jump to conclusions with my own perspective that means, all right, we want to be authentic, which we do, right? We want to be authentic. But this is really talking about our counterpart, whether it's in the business or as a client. When we don't interrupt others, their authenticity becomes clear to us. So we get to see their authenticity. So as a salesperson, that as a guardian that goes into somebody's home, if I'm not listening to me, they may be saying, I don't want to pay my deductible. I'm a roofer. My father's a roofer. I'm an insurance adjuster. I don't need your help with these things. Or, I've already gotten my claim paid for. I just need to get the install done. We may either miss things that will really streamline the process so we can help them quicker and smoother, or that they may not be a good fit for our company if they say, oh, I'm not paying my deductible, or I don't have insurance, or whatever these things are. If we don't listen to them, the fine details, and ask the questions, their authenticity doesn't become clear to us. And that's a very big deal in what we do, because what we do is go out, we make people aware that there's the hailstorm. We do so much legwork, we provide so much value up front on basically a handshake. And if we don't listen to them, there's a high probability that at the end of the day, they may have been saying it all along that they're not going to work with us. Then it can be disappointing. It can be discouraging, take the wind out of people's sails, as out of a sales rep sales. So all those things being said, it's the inversion of it. where we can go. And I say it when I wrote it that way, it is, I see in not an absolute, but over 25 years of being in sales and hearing things, like some of the mantra mindset is like, you do what you do, don't let anybody knock you off your horse, which are, there's some of these are positive, like stay positive, keep moving on, but it's almost sometimes it can be taken as a detriment for the end user, the salesperson that's gaining the relationship with somebody. If they just stay so stone faced, so non-emotional, and only this character that's like, yeah, we can help, super excited, they can really miss that because they're anonymous. They're anonymous as well as the client to them is anonymous. Change the face, change the person, and it doesn't matter. Just say what you have to say, educate them, ask the right questions, and sign the deal and move forward. So that's where I see the inversion of authentic versus anonymous and how we navigate that.
I'm going to challenge the audience to re-listen to that part. I think it's really profound from a sales training standpoint for long-term success of the salesperson's journey, like tenure, whether they're going to be in sales for a long, long time, or whether they're going to elevate to management. That distinction between how they behave with the customer, I think, is worth a re-listen. I think that authentic steward is going to enjoy and go deeper in relationships and build that customer base longer, and or be elevated into management and be actually capable of it, as opposed to those that are elevated based on their results and they're incapable of actually leading people. They're capable of closing people, they're not capable of leading people. Close is a transaction, leading is a relation over time. And when they're terrible at, this is what I've observed, when they're so good at the closing, like the transaction, and so bad at the relation after they get promoted, they blame their cultures and then they go and become teachers of closing or selling or some type of, and not anonymity. And I think that's the antithesis to the culture piece. The culture piece is about the relationships with the customers, and the relationships with the team, and the relationships with the self, ourselves, and there's a relationship. So, what a great end to this episode. Whoever's listening, go back, listen to that again. It's worth it. A listen. Follow Robert, and we'll see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast.
Thanks, Jay.